I passed this Lich gate on a local walk. Now, Lich gates were originally a churchyard affair. They were a covered entranceway of the churchyard where coffins could be rested from when the body was removed from the house to when it could actually be buried in the days before mortuaries. However, they're a popular feature, and especially in climates of unpredictable weather, they can sometimes be a handy shelter from the storm, so to speak. But I thought it was a great subject for a short daily exercise. And the main thing really is, at this point, is with this angle. I'm drawing with a 0.2 millimeter pen. And if you're finding this video and this series helpful, please hit the like button for me and let me know how your experience of regular daily practice is going. The thing about this is it is a practice exercise. So we're not necessarily trying to create a whole drawing, although I am trying to keep these subjects simpler so that there is more chance of having something that looks a bit like a drawing in 10, 15, 20 minutes. But because they're practice exercises, we can also simplify our reference significantly if we want to focus on one part in more detail. The whole idea of practice is to get practice at a particular thing, at a narrower range. Now, there are a few effects in this, a few things that we have to draw, and so one of the ways we can practice is to practice various techniques. So for this lattice work in the upper part of the front of the Lich gate, you can see what I'm doing. I'm doing the grid that we can see, but I have no intention of using this as, if you like, a template to colour in the squares. I've drawn that to create a certain visual impression as well as a guide for putting the black squares in and to help me keep them small enough, because I thought that was going to be the challenge. And at first I approximately fill in the squares, but as I move down, I find that the lines aren't in the best place to make the squares look regular. And so I start to ignore the squares that I've drawn, and I draw these shadows in best I can what the right place is. But of course I use the lines to help me align these squares. So I continue doing that. Now you're watching this at real time, remember, at this point. After 10.5 minutes, we'll switch to slightly more than double speed. So I've done those, but now that doesn't give the effect of what I see. There is an emphasis on one angle of these crisscrossing lines. The lattice that's on top of the other gives a stronger effect. So now I want to capture that stronger effect and the very slight three-dimensional view we get of it. And I think that creates visually a nice effect. And I've achieved it by not actually trying to draw the detail. And so now we get to do the support of the roof. Trying to make it a bit straighter. Don't leave it crooked. If it's crooked, straighten it. It will be less obvious with an extra line a millimetre off than if we actually lock it into place crooked. And depending which way the lean goes, we might find there's some convenient shadows, some convenient hatching that we can add to hide the line that's tilting out too far. And so now drawing these timber insets by negative space, because I'm actually drawing the gaps, the shadows between these pieces of timber. This is the sort of subject where drawing with negative space can be really, really convenient, a much easier way of addressing a scene such as this. Now I simplify this drawing a little bit and I don't put the large tree behind the bare branches of the liquid amber that's behind. I decide to keep it a bit shorter. It took me 19 minutes, so in 10.5 minutes I pretty much draw the Lich gate, and after that I'm mostly doing hatching. So I've sped that up, but if you'd like to watch that at real time as well, if you use the cog icon you can reduce it to half speed, which will have it only very slightly faster than real time. So now there's this overhanging foliage on the left hand side, which we don't have on the right hand side, which I think visually creates a lot of interest, a lot of variation in the shadows, in the textures, in the edges, the silhouettes, which was part of what attracted me to this Lich gate. So I hadn't quite worked out what I was going to do with these brick piers at the front, as in whether I was going to show the brickwork or what. So my mark making is a little hesitant with that first one, and now trying to align the second one with what I've already drawn. I feel like my gap between the two is slightly too wide at this point, and I think it is at the end as well, though perhaps not as overly wide as I thought at this stage. So now I'm thinking, man, I got to get on with this if I'm going to get this done in a short period of time. So using my pen to check the angles, I usually put a dot first as to where I think it's going to be, because that gives me practice at visualizing without using the sliding pen. And then I check it with the sliding pen, and that tells me how far along I've come with my visual estimations of angles. Sometimes once I've put the dot down, I can see that that's not right, and I'll place another dot without yet using the pen as a guide. And so now, still working on this is sort of where I got a bit bogged down time-wise. I think I should have been a little less concerned about precision. I just slipped into a different mindset at this point. Possibly because it's a cold morning here, and so let's and now I start looking at the parts that I haven't really looked at yet, which I think is possibly the other reason I'm slowing down. I've moved into a new part, the lower part, the fence and whatnot, and the gap between the supports, the brick supports, and I haven't really observed those yet in this drawing. So we need to remember that as we move from part of the drawing to other parts of the drawing, we lose the observation memory that we have. We lose the building up of looking at the same part over and over again for a few minutes. And so we do need to reduce the speed of our drawing when we break into new territory, until we start to get a bit of familiarity with what we see. And now we have these pickets on the fence. Now notice how I want to give an indication of the horizontal post beam that these pickets are nailed onto, and you can see I do that by that method. I did a dotted line along the fence, not worried about lining that dotted line up with the gaps, but then I used those as a reference to bring down a heavier shadow in the parts of the pickets that don't have any of the horizontal beams behind them. And I do the same thing here. There's the dotted line. And now I just strengthen that line slightly down to where the dots are. And that, I think, comfortably creates that effect without having to draw horizontal lines across, which of course visually don't represent what we're seeing in practice. And it also avoids just trying to do the same effect without any guide, which ends up with a wavy line or a sloping line or a combination of the two sitting behind the fence, which also doesn't look very fence-like. So this is the technique I've worked out to help me manage picket fences, which are not an uncommon subject for me in the sorts of scenes that I draw. And so we've now moved into just over double time and a half we're actually in at this point. So I'm doing some foliage and some shadow between foliage, so I'm on much more familiar ground now. I'm much more comfortable doing this sort of thing and able to speed up a bit and cover some more of the paper, get through more of the scene a bit faster, not just because it is sped up, but because I could actually go faster. And there are some camellia flowers that we see there. I didn't want to do just the same level of value of darkness all on this right-hand side. I wanted to suggest that there was some sort of smaller or lower shrub just reaching up above the fence line and then something further back behind that. So just trying to create that effect. Here I am now doing some value hatching on the top of the Lich roof and getting a bit closer now to being finished. Now looking at some of the shadow that's being cast on this, well, shade and shadow. And while I don't want to get too concerned with that, I do want to indicate some of it. And now we have really the last major part that I haven't done yet, which is this fence that lines each side of the Lich as we walk in. So I had to adjust the top, but with all the hatching, that was easy enough to do, using the same technique to give some indication that these are pickets nailed onto a beam. And now just working at darkening the shadows to give a little more sense of this moves back in, because really a Lich gate, I think why it is a great subject is that it invites us to walk in. It's the start of a passageway of an adventure. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. I hope you found this interesting. I think it's a great little subject for a daily drawing practice, and exactly what we draw and how much we draw and how long we spend drawing it, well, that's up to us. But whatever you draw, however much of it you do or don't, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.